Okay, so remember for Lab 3, we have already sys-prepped and cloned out our template, cloned them to DC and VC, and I went ahead and organized them into folders already. Lab 3 specifically is working on our domain controller. One thing I want to note before I power it on is that verify that the network adapter is our VM network 8. Remember, that's for the 192.168.246.0 network. Also verify that it's 4 gigs of memory and 2 processors, just so that before we power it on, we know that it's all set to go. Once you've verified all of that, go ahead and power on your virtual machine. You might get a few prompts about your floppy 0 drive not being there. Just choose the appropriate response. You may get a few items like ISOs that might be mounted, or USB devices that are there. I mean, just choose the appropriate response. Remember, since this is a sys-prepped machine, that we're going to have to go through the initial setup. That includes starting up services, that includes setting up devices. So this process can take anywhere between 4 and 5 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video now while this preps, and I'll see you in a second. Okay, so all in all, it took about 5 minutes. It restarted, and when it restarted, it actually loaded our basic setup. So go ahead and answer the questions correctly. Here we aren't going to be doing a project key because we're doing this in a virtual lab environment. So I'm just going to go ahead and uncheck it and skip it. You have to agree to the normal software terms, and we're going to go ahead and start it. Remember, as a virtual machine, you want to do, instead of Alt-Control-Delete, Alt-Control-Insert, because delete will do it on both the physical and the virtual machine. In our example, we're going to be logging in as the administrator. The password should be expired since we did sysprep it. Even though it's a blank password, it was still expired and it's still considered a password. So we're going to go ahead and give it a new password. Our lab password for this class is password with a capital P and a $sign at the end. So PASSWORD $sign. Capital PASSWORD $sign, and the password's been accepted. We're going to go ahead and log into the machine. First thing that we should note is it should actually bring up the initial configuration wizard for us. It should also bring up Security Essentials to be reconfigured since it is a brand new install. Our lab also says to install the feature for WINS, set an IP address, and set a name. Because if you look right here for our name, our computer name is win-9 blah 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 blah. It's just a random Windows generated name. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and change the name. To DC. Going to go ahead and click on OK. It may take a second to change the name. I'm also going to put in the description. It's going to be our domain controller for our VITA.Local domain. I know none of these will take effect until I restart it, but I'm going to go ahead and set up the WINS feature, and then I will go ahead and restart it. So I'm going to apply it, restart later, because I want to just be able to do the restart all at once. I'm going to, apparently I'm going to go ahead and restart now. So I will pause it and I'll be right back. One of the important things to remember that when we're setting up a domain controller, if you try to rename it after you promote it, it causes a lot of issues. Not that it's impossible to rename it, it's just there's a lot of problems with that. So I just got back restarting. Our computer name is DC. We're going to go add in the feature for our Win. Win server should be at the very bottom. We're installing this because one of our labs require Wins. However, in a production environment, you probably will not be using Wins because there are numerous vulnerabilities that attack Wins specifically. We're going to click on Next. Make sure that yes, we do want to install Win server, which we do. Click on Install, and it takes about 3 or 4 minutes depending. Okay, so once it's done installing, we're going to go ahead and close it. I'm going to set up our addressing first, because you'll notice here our IPv6 address is assigned by DHCP. This is going to be a domain controller, so we don't want to do that. So how we get there is you can click on the Configure Networking, or you can also right-click on the network icon down here. It doesn't matter how you do it. Expand out your virtual NIC and go to its properties. We are not currently setting up IPv6, so we're going to ignore that. Go to IPv4, go to its properties, and we want to follow the documentation on our lab, which is 192.168. Also helps if you make sure that number lock is on. 246. Our lab document says to use .19, so that's what I'm going to do. Again, you want to verify with the document what address you're putting in here. I'm going to do a loop back because this is going to be our domain controller. Also, because we are doing Wins, we want to go ahead and click on Advanced. Make sure all of this information is correct, which it should be. Go to Wins, add in our Win server, which is the same address as our domain controller. Also, check the Enable NetBIOS over TCP/IP and click OK. So there is our basic addressing, and that is all good. I'm going to ignore this for now because we just changed our DNS, but we haven't set up DNS yet. So I'm going to go and minimize that. Make sure that that is tied to our lab document, which it is. So from there, we're going to go ahead and we're going to set up our new domain controller. How we do that is we go to Start in our search dialog, DC promo. If we're using Server 2008, if we were using Server 2012, DC promo doesn't work like that anymore. You actually have to make sure that you install Active Directory. Also make sure to spell DC promo correctly. Once you're ready, go ahead and launch it. We're going to be doing a very basic configuration. All that Active Directory is going to do in our lab environment is it's going to act as our authentication and DNS for our vSphere hosts. In a work environment or a production environment, you can make it do a lot more. It's just here we just want our Active Directory to be setting up our authentication and DNS. This may take a little while, so I'm going to pause it, and sometimes it takes a little while, sometimes it doesn't, but I'm just going to leave the standard mode. I'm going to go and click on Next. Read through the software compatibility. We do not have an existing forest, so I'm just going to create a new domain, a new forest. We're naming this VITA.Local. VITA is the name of our virtual domain. It's going to verify that VITA.Local is appropriate. Functional level, whether it be forest or domain, we're going to go ahead and put to R2, because that's going to allow us the most feature-rich environment. And I know for a fact that we're not deploying any servers that are less than Server 2008 R2 anyway. So once you choose Force Functional Level, go and click on Next. It detected that DNS is not installed, so we're going to go ahead and install DNS. Leave that checked. Go ahead and click on Next. Okay, so you're going to get a few errors. The delegation for the DNS server cannot be created because the administrative parent zone cannot be found or does not run Windows DNS Server. Do you want to continue? This is how you read this question. Do you want to continue? We don't have a parent domain for VITA.Local. We're just barely creating it. So yes, we want to continue. You may get another message about a static IP address not being set. That's one of those weird errors that even if you have it set, sometimes still pops up. We're going to leave all the database default folders. For our data recovery and our restore mode, we're going to use our normal class password. That's password of a capital P, $. Verify that these are the settings that we want, and they are. Click on Next. And this can take anywhere between 3 or 4 minutes to over an hour. I'm going to click on Reboot on completion, and I will just let it run. Okay, so it didn't take too long, but on our lab computers, because of the age of the hard drives, this may take a little while, so do be patient. It just restarted, so I'm going to go ahead and log in as our administrator. Our lab document wants us to do a few more steps before we get done. And that is essentially, we want to set up some shortcuts on our desktop to make our life easier. And we need to do some DNS record keeping. So we want to go and we want to add at least our services, our DNS, and our Active Directory users and computer icons as shortcuts on the desktop, as well as an administrative command prompt and a shutdown script. So I'm going to do the command prompt first. I'm just going to drag it to the desktop. I'm going to do our DNS and services next. You can drag them, or you can just right click on them, send to desktop. One for our DNS as well. One for our Active Directory users and computers. And one for our wins, just in case we need it. So there's our wins, there's our DNS, Active Directory users and computers, command prompt, and services. The last one we need is to go ahead and create a shutdown bat file. That way we can shut them down fairly quickly. So how we do that is we're going to go ahead and open up Notepad, and we're going to... So there are several ways to do this. Normally you can just type shutdown and the appropriate switches, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm going to do a surefire way to do this, and that is I'm going to type the path to where shutdown is really located, which is c:/Windows/System32/shutdown. We can't just do that though. We need to add in the switch -S for shutdown, because we can do this as a restart with the correct switch. We're going to do -F for fast and -P for our time. We want to have it wait 0 seconds. The S is shutdown, F is fast and forced, and T is time in seconds. Once you're done, go ahead and save it. We want to make sure that we save it as a bat file though, so you don't just want to click save. Go save as. I want to save it on the desktop, and if you do it in quotation marks, shutdown.bat in quotation marks. It will save this as a bat file. If you don't do the quotation marks, it's going to add the .text extension. Kind of pay attention right there once we save it. Notice it's a gear. If it's not a gear and it's a text document, that's because it added the .text at the very end. Now that Security Essentials keeps popping up, we'll go ahead and go through its run through real quick, which is just the normal rundown. Licensing. Do you want to join the program for customer experience? Don't really care right now. Because it's a test environment, I really don't want to bother with the updates or scanning right now, so I'm just going to uncheck it. It will go through some updates, which I don't really care about right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and minimize this. Okay, so we only have one last step in our lab, and that is setting up some DNS records. So we're going to go ahead and open up our DNS records, expand out our domain controller DNS server. First thing that we want to do is create a reverse lookup zone for the 192.168.246 network. So navigate to the reverse lookup zone. Notice that there is no zone currently there. So we're going to go ahead and right click on it, add new zone. And since we don't have anyone yet, it'll just give us our standard basic layout. What type of zone do we want? We want a primary zone. We want it to store the zone in Active Directory. Depending on your environment, you may change the type of zone type. But for this environment, a primary zone works. We want to make sure that all domain controllers in this domain, the VITA.Local domain, has the ability to change it and run on it. Because this is a lab environment, it doesn't matter if it's all in the forest or domain, they're the same ones. You could also select all domain controllers in this domain. For our purposes, that option is fine. We are not doing IPv6 just yet, so IPv4 reverse lookup zone is the appropriate option. So, how we want to do this is 192.168.6. Notice that the network ID is the first 3 octets. That is just our network. Our reverse lookup zone is going to be our network backwards. 246.168.192.in address ARPA. That's the appropriate way that it should look. We're not adding our 4th octet because our subnetwork is a 255.255.255.0 subnet mask. So this is our network portion. From there, we're going to go ahead and hit next. For us, we want to allow only secure dynamic updates, meaning only responses to updates from other Active Directory DNS servers in our domain will allow the updates. Again, depending on your environment, you may have to change these options, but in our lab environment, these options are fine. Go ahead and click on Next, and when you're ready, click Finish. We are done. However, we do want to make sure that we add in a few records. Because here is our reverse lookup zone. But we need to add in a few other records. We need to add in some A records. There are no A records here. So if you right click in an open area, Other New Record, select A. And our reverse lookup records are going to be our ESXi, one host, and that address is going to be 192.168.246.21. Because we are going to name our first ESXi host ESX1. We're going to assign it that address. And there it is. We're going to add in a second one for our ESX2 hosts. And we're going to have that address at 22. Those are the two major ones that we add. That way, when we start setting up our vSphere hosts, we don't have to worry about typing in the IP address. We can just type in the name. We're going to do the same thing, but in our forward lookup zone as well. So we're going to go to forward lookup zone. We're going to go to our domain, VITA.Local, and we're going to create 2 new A records. Again, right click in an open white area, click on new host, A or AAA, ESXi1, make sure that you double check the addresses, make sure they are correct. This one I'm going to create an associated pointer. I'm going to add the host. I'm going to add in my second host, ESXi2. I'm going to again make sure that is checked. I'm going to add the host. It was created successfully, and those were the 2 hosts that I wanted to make sure that were there. And that actually is it for this lab. Thank you.